wherever you are, whenever you're listening to this, changes. Hang out on air on Google+. This is Sally Ember, EDD. I am the host and creator of this unique hangout, and today is episode 6. Today is September 24th, 2014, and we are so lucky to have as our guest author, blogger, reviewer, and all kinds of other great talents in Charlee Allden. Say hi to everybody, Charlee.
Hi, good morning. It's great to be here.
So this morning, Charlee and I are going to talk about science fiction and romance and books and blogging and short stories and our backgrounds and anything else we feel like. Please go on and comment, ask questions. The comments tracker, wait for it, is actually working today. I can't believe it. So don't jinx it. Just accept it and thank all of the people who have decided to attend today. I am so happy that Rain decided to come on. Rain Dial is my fairy godmother for the Hangouts on air. She's been my constant companion and helping me learn things, so I can't give you enough shout-outs, Rain, and Melanie Hall for her broadcast to help me learn how to do this. And Charlee was just asking me about how do you learn how to do this and how do people do this, so I want to give some more shout-outs at the end of the show and give you some URLs, all of you that want to learn how to do this, including Charlee. I am no expert, but as you may have seen from the last 5 episodes, I can stumble through. So today we're going to talk about some things that Charlee and I both love in science fiction and romance. So first, Charlee, tell me, how did you decide to make that your cross-genre of choice?
Well, I think the first thing I started reading as a young adult was science fiction, and I loved it, but I always looked for the books with the girl heroines, and I looked for the ones with romance, so it was a natural sort of thing. I started putting them together in my head long before I started writing them on paper, and so when I got into writing, it's the fun thing to write. I write other things too, but I just, it's like while I'm writing sci-fi romance, I'm just happy and giddy, so it was natural for me.
Well, you're not alone, obviously. There are lots of people who like to read them and lots of people who like to write them, and you and I have both been involved in something called the Sci-Fi Romance Brigade on Facebook, which has its own page and its own website and has just this last 12 months started its own zine, which is called the Sci-Fi Romance Quarterly. Tell us how you became a contributor and what you contribute to it.
Well, for the magazine, I actually was approached by the team, the editor, Kaz Augustine, and she asked me to write a column. So I was all in for that. I love to blog. I've been blogging for several years. It's my favorite topic. So as soon as she said, do you want to write a column, I was absolutely thrilled to do it. And it's come out better than I could have imagined. She's done a brilliant job. The whole team, Heather from Galaxy Express and Diane Dooley is like their fiction editor. And so it's wonderful to be a part of that. And I was around from the beginning of the brigade. I'm not as active there as I used to be, but it has been amazing to connect with so many people that are in love with the same genre that I am.
Well, I really love that story because I think that the people who started that were very creative, and Pippa is actually the first one. Pippa J was the first one I connected with, and lots of other people since then. And I haven't been as active myself lately either, but I just love that it exists. And in reference to what we were talking about a minute ago, thank you, Sheila Strover, for taking what I said and making it a hashtag. Rain Fairy Godmother. That is hilarious. I hope that gets on Twitter and goes viral because she totally is. And you, Sheila, have been great too. Sheila is the comments wrangler for Melanie Hall's show that I was telling you about that helps people learn how to do this called Lights, Camera, HOA. Right. And Sheila was sort of my role model, and then Rain and Sheila both have been doing this in other HOAs that I've seen. And so I'm doing my best today, ladies. I hope I do you proud, and if not, it's not your fault. So meanwhile, back in sci-fi romance, here's the question I have, and I want you to answer this as honestly as you can while keeping it PG. Where does the line fall for you between sci-fi romance and erotica, and how do you decide which side of the line to put a particular piece of writing?
Right. That's a really good question, and I think my answer is maybe a little different than a lot of people's. But I put time into thinking about this actually, and for me, a romance is primarily about the relationship of between the characters, and in sci-fi romance, it's the relationship and whatever the plot is. You know, the plot action that's going on, the adventure or whatever that is. And I think in erotic romance, and erotica obviously doesn't have romance, but erotic romance with sci-fi is really has to be the intimate relationship, the physical relationship, is the center focus of the story. Because
Ah,
yeah, a lot of sci-fi romance has a physical side, but it's not the focus of the story. So if it's the focus,
interesting.
yeah, if it's the focus, that's erotica. But not everybody uses that definition.
Well, I was going to say, if I had asked myself that question, which obviously I was doing in my mind, I would have answered it a little differently. You're right. I would have said that what makes it more on the side of erotica is how explicit it is. It
Right.
isn't so much whether it's the focus from my point of view, but it's how specific do the descriptions of the interactions get when they're going into that intimate romantic moment. You know how in the old movies the people would start kissing and then everything would go to black, or you'd see a sunset or a sunrise and the next scene would just be something totally different, or you'd see them lying down in bed as if it were afterwards,
Right.
right? But you don't see anything in between. So to me, that's the romantic perspective, is you know that they're having some interaction that involves sex, but you don't see it, you don't hear it, you don't have to read about it, and it's over, and then you go on with the plot or the relationship or whatever, the adventure. But in erotica, they make a big point of being very explicit and giving you all the details and showing them on the screen if it's a film, or putting them right in the paragraphs with who touches what and where. And some people love that. And some people don't want to read it or don't want their young people to read it. Of course, young people all want to read it. But the point I'm making is I think that distinction is very individual, and I appreciate what you said.
Well, I understand, and I think your definition is probably much more common. And
Mm-hmm.
I think the reason I stay away from that is because um, the romance genre in general has become more explicit. And
That's true. That's really true.
and where you draw that line is very difficult. If you start trying to like list words to use or not use, list activities to do or not do, it's too hard to say where. Um, you know,
That's so true. I love that you said that, because I wouldn't have put it that way. But that's brilliant. That's exactly what's happened. Because you go to the regular section. I use the library a lot because I never have a lot of money. So I go to the library and I go to the romance section. I pick up a book and I read the blurb, and it all seems kind of romantic. But then you open it and start to read it, and right away there's no clothes. And they're doing things without clothes on. And I'm like, wait a minute. How did we get to that already? And what's going on here? I wanted a little rating on the book or something. Not that I object to it, but I just kind of want a little warning, you know?
right. Yeah, and I know it's hard. It's hard these days. It's really hard. And a lot of people who don't want to read that have gone to inspirational romance as a safe haven, you know. But
But isn't that just a code word for Christian? And if we're not Christian, that's not so popular, right?
exactly, exactly. And I think you shouldn't have to go that route if that's not really what you're interested in, just to feel safe reading a book, you know. So
Yeah.
we need a little truth in labeling, I guess.
Well, and that's why the other group I belong to, called Clean Indie Reads, that was started by Leah London, shout out to you, Leah, who's going to be on the show later this fall when she gets her schedule together, is really important. But I noticed that there is a whole string of people that are into that inspirational slash Christian portion, and then there's a bunch of us who aren't, and we're not like at odds with each other or anything, but there are two different reasons for being, or many different reasons for being in the Clean Indie Reads group. And I think that nobody has really recognized how important that genre, subgenre category is.
Well, yeah, I agree. That is, we used to call it sweet romance. So you can sometimes label it that way as well. And I'm not hearing you, so I'm sorry if I'm talking over you, but I'll just say that you know, the sweet romance is still there, and I think it's coming back more. But in sci-fi romance, you tend to have a bit of a division, you know, because sci-fi romance has always had a high number of erotic romances, and there's erotic romance and also the really clean sci-fi. And so there's a big spectrum in sci-fi romance, and that's one of the things that I really do like about it. So I'm still not hearing you, so I will go on to say that going back to the Sci-Fi Romance Brigade, I was actually invited to that when I was a member of RWA, which is the Romance Writers of America, and the Lori Green actually was the one who invited me to participate in that. And she used to talk a lot about how we needed to bring sci-fi romance to the mainstream. And I joined Sci-Fi Brigade, and I started meeting people and talking to people. And that's actually what inspired my blog. I have the Smart Girls Love Sci-Fi blog. And I wanted to make it something that would appeal to people outside of our niche genre. So I have a wide variety of things on that blog, including, you know, TV shows and movies and just geeky stuff. I love this sort of movement towards geeky pride. So you could say that the Sci-Fi Romance Brigade really had a huge impact, and you sort of changed sort of what I'm doing in a lot of areas. And I really hope you're going to be able to get back into the call soon, so I can have you talking again. I still can't see you, so I will I will say that you know, the website, the blog. I know you blog as well. Has been around for a couple of years now, and we're growing and growing. And we've added, I actually just recently added a blogger that blogs exclusively about sci-fi TV, and we're really excited to have her. So we're now going to have a weekly post strictly about TV. And of course, she dragged me into watching Sleepy Hollow, which it just is not exactly sci-fi, but is all the rage at the moment and just came out this week. And you know, we love to debate whether I think you're coming back. We love to debate whether romance should happen in those TV shows. Hey, are you back? So, are you back there? No. So, so yeah. So we've had a lot of we've had a lot of variety there, and it's something that takes more and more of my time these days. So.
I'm back. Sorry, my computer kicked me out.
Yay! I'm glad you're back.
My computer and I are just not friends so far, but it was going great, so I'm sorry about what I missed.
That's okay. I just kept on talking, and I mentioned the blog, but go ahead, and where were we when you left us?
Well, no, that's great. I'm glad you mentioned your blog, because I wanted to know if people on your blog, back to our other topic, have a variety of subgenres in sci-fi romance or in sci-fi, and what you would label those as.
Right. Well, the blog is made up of, you know, originally it was just me, but after a couple of years, it got really hard to keep up with doing all of the content production on my own. So I started adding other bloggers to the group, and some of those are actually reviewers. We do reviews, and they're readers, and we also have authors that blog about a topic that they're interested in. I have Chudney Thomas, who is a huge paranormal person, so we also had added paranormal to the blog at that time, and she blogs specifically about that. And I was saying that I just added a TV blogger, because on the blog we don't just talk about books, we also talk about other relevant media. And she's not as big of a romance fan as I am, or as some of the others are. And even within my reviewers, some of them like really hot and sexy books, and some of them like the straight sci-fi. So we have a really broad, you know, base of content that is on the blog now, which is kind of nice.
Okay, well that is so good to know, and I want to get into more what you all define that is included in paranormal, because that's another one of those subgenres or genres, whatever you want to call it, that has a multiple perspective or many definitions. How do you define it?
Right. Well, to me, the difference between paranormal and sci-fi is paranormal is magic. You don't explain how things happen or why things happen unless it is to point to magic or religion or occult or one of those things. And so it's, you know,
okay, I would go along with that. And then, so in my books, I have sci-fi / romance / paranormal, and then I make a big point of saying, but my paranormal is just psi, PSI. I don't have shapeshifters, I don't have werewolves, I don't have magicians or wizards, I don't have vampires, I don't have all that other kind of stuff that a lot of people do great with, and I'm not putting it down at all. I'm just saying all I have are the psi abilities, which to me aren't magic. So now, is psi paranormal or not?
Yes, well, psi is one of the things that I think gets debated a lot. I've always considered it sci-fi because it was in all the sci-fi books that I read as a kid.
Okay.
And I guess because I believe there could be some basis for it in reality, and if you say that it's a physiological part of the person and not something gifted to them by a higher power or a curse or something like that, then to me it is definitely science fiction. But
yeah, I agree with you, and I think that's, even though I am sort of required to call it paranormal in this decade, I think very soon that won't be the case, because scientists have just this month proven that they can send thoughts from person to person using a computer interface with not touching anything and not typing or anything else that we would ordinarily call communication. So it's basically mind to mind. And the content of the thoughts or the content of the image is still what you might call fuzzy, but they can tell because of the bits and bytes that were transmitted that it actually was transmitted.
Absolutely.
So that's just amazing to me. And that is science. That is not paranormal magic. And so to me, that means a lot of other things are going to start opening up to our understanding. You know, I think it was Isaac Asimov or Arthur C. Clarke who originally said that magic is just science that we don't understand yet.
Yes.
Something along those lines. I might have misquoted him, but that's the gist, right?
Well, I think, yeah, I think it might be something more like the further you get into the future, science and magic look the same. But it's, yeah, I don't think either one of us have the quote exactly, exactly right, but I'm real familiar with that quote, and I agree completely.
Right, like even just the smallest things that they had in the original Star Trek TV series, like doors that open when you just stand in front of them. I didn't grow up having those, but they did obviously have them, or they couldn't have had them on TV, or they had something where someone pressed a secret button. But now you really can go and stand in front of a door and it will open. Because we have that optical laser technology, recognition, whatever makes it work, right?
That's right. That's right.
And there were other things they had on that show. Lots and lots of stuff. Every year, I can't remember her name. I will give her a shout out and put it on the page when I find it. But every year there is a woman who does a list of this year's scientific inventions or achievements or accomplishments that used to be in science fiction or that were foretold by science fiction authors, and now they're real. She does it once a year, and it is a fantastic list. So interesting. And this year they're going to add that beam, the tractor beam, because that's the other thing they just figured out this month by looking at wave patterns and moving things with wave patterns. Now they can understand and create actual tractor beams.
And I always wonder how much of the direction of our scientific investigation is focused by the science fiction that we've had. You know?
Yeah, it gives us ideas, right?
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of scientists say they were inspired as a kid by science fiction and then went and invented something they read about.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, the third thing that just came out, this has been an incredible month. I don't know if anybody else has been paying attention, but I get science news feeds on my Facebook and Google Plus because I'm such a science geek and I love it. The other latest thing they've understood and now can do is they can teleport. They have teleported something beyond the size of a quantum particle. They teleported a cluster of quantum particles and something else, I don't know, from one spot to another. So that is just the beginning of Beam Me Up Scotty, right?
Right. Is that the experiment that they're doing where they're sending the particles through a mountain from one side to the other?
You know, I don't think so. That must be another one.
Yeah, I heard about that one. I haven't heard about this one you're talking about, but
This one was
okay.
from one building to another.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
Like in a university or science research
Right.
campus or something. I'll put
Right.
up some URLs about that because I collect these things. And then I'm going to end up putting a lot of them in my books, in my future volumes of the Spanner series. I've already put a lot of things like that in the Spanner series anyway that weren't real when I wrote them or weren't actually happening, and now they are.
I think
Like
it's,
one of those things is the whole multiverse
yes.
understanding, right?
Yes.
So Rain is on the show now, and she just put a comment that I want to bubble up for her. So there you go, Rain. You're famous, not just as my fairy godmother. I want to put that list up, and I will. And thank you for putting that in the comments, so now I can't forget. So that's excellent. Now, the other thing I'm interested in for you, Charlie, is you were talking about being a reviewer. And lots of people need to be reviewed, and lots and lots of reviewers are completely overwhelmed. What are we going to do?
Well, I know it's hard. It's really hard because I get way many more requests than we can review. You know, and we don't. There's very few reviewers that are professional reviewers. That is a job that they get paid for. Most reviewers do it on a volunteer basis, and so they're all working a day job, you know, and they can only read so many books. But you know, we have so many more reviewers now than we used to. It used to be that you had like Publishers Weekly and Kirkus and the New York Times and local papers might do a review or two every once in a while. But we have a lot more reviewers than we used to, so that's a good thing.
But we also have millions more books.
We do. And, you know, I know people fall either side of the Amazon scale, but Amazon did introduce the way that, you know, individual readers can review books, and there's, you know, there's been all kinds of scandal about, you know, how accurate those are, how real they are. But it is a way that you can get more information about a book, and they have, you know, you can almost always get a sample of a book online. So we haven't lost so much, I think. We still have ways to find out about a book. I always sample books before I buy them. So
well, that's good. That's good. I think that's what blurbs are for, and now the blurbs have just gotten longer.
well,
You can get free samples.
yeah, a lot of some samples are only a few pages, but a lot of samples are a full chapter. So, and I think a chapter in, you have a good idea of whether or not you're going to enjoy the read. So.
Well, my first book, This Changes Everything, went permanently free in April when I put up my second book. And before that, and now for my second book, I put up between 5 and 13 chapters because I have full-length novels.
Right.
So each of my books is over 300 pages. So I put up, you know, 20 to 30% of them are up for free before they were permanently free, the first one. And I think that's really useful. They're up on Wattpad. That's wattpad.com, WATTPAD.com, and Authonomy, which is run by HarperCollins, AUTHONMONY.com. And then there's also Juke Pop, which is for serials, not the kind you eat, but the kind you write. And you can put up samples or actual whole things up there. There's a lot of places. And on my blog, I've put up chapters. And I started out just doing snippets on Facebook sequentially and going all the way through to the end of the 13th chapter, which is then what I popped up on those other places. Have you been doing that too?
No, I haven't at all. And I know that Wattpad, I've heard a lot about it, and it's getting a lot of buzz. I'd love to know more about it, but it's not something that I have dipped into myself.
These are free. There's also Bublish, Bublish, which puts up what they call book bubbles, which is the same idea, where you put up as much or as little of your book as you want, or your novella, or whatever, your story, so people can sample it, get into it, and decide if they want to get the whole thing or buy it if it's for sale.
Well, I think it's one of the more challenging things authors face now, is trying to get the word out about their book, and there's all these different places where you can do that, but each one has a certain market, a certain segment of people that are there, and so that kind of forces authors to be everywhere, and just the logistics of making that happen can be a big time-consuming effort on the author's part. So
it is. It is. Now I'm going to give a shout out to some of my other favorite people in the whole book marketing world. Sean Monahar and RJ Adams are the bookmarketingtools.com people, and they have created a tool where if you have a free book or short story or novella or whatever that you have already put up for free on Amazon or any other places, they will let you use their tool for a very small amount of money, like, I don't know, $30 or something, and they'll put it up once you fill out their form. It's a database-infused form of your free piece of writing that you want to put up. It'll go up on 100 sites all at once, and then you have to do a little tweak here and there for particular sites, and they lead you through it with their tool, because some sites want you to put your name this way or your title that way, or include your website or not include your website. But for the most part, their tool streamlines this arduous, time-consuming process that before their tool would take you hundreds and hundreds of hours to put your book up on all these free sites when it's free, or sites that allow you to post free things. And I want to thank them for doing that. And they also have their own show called The Author Show, a Hangout on Air, which is one of the first ones I ever watched. And so they inspired me. And I'm giving them a shout out in my show today, because they're restarting in September. They took part of the summer off. And that's another one I'm going to recommend to you, Charlie, because you were saying, oh, what should I watch? What would be good to learn from? Go to The Author's Show. They're great. They're really interesting. And I also want to say that because you're a science writer, do you want to tell us what kind of tech stuff you write about?
Well, that's a good question. I write mostly, gosh, I write all sorts of different things. But the thing that I'm concentrating on right now, it is really, I guess I have a sociology background, so a lot of what I write about is culture and introducing new concepts of culture and culture clashes and those sorts of things. The tech side of it, I have looked a lot at parallel universes. I have a story that has people that shift from one parallel universe to the other, and sort of but then again, I'm also still focusing on culture there, because they shift into the regular world, and you know, there's a huge cultural backlash against them. So them being there, you know, so it's kind of a little bit of like, I don't know if you remember the old.
Say it again. Uh-oh, you got frozen. Okay, well, I'm going to keep talking because maybe you got kicked out, and I hope you can come back. Are you still there?
Can you hear me?
Oh, now you're back. Great.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, good. So, other planet, and they kind of had a little bit of a adjustment period. And so the story that I'm writing is a little bit about that, and I know you love the multiverse idea, which is fabulous.
Oh, that's what we were talking about when I got kicked out. I
Yes.
was saying that was the third scientific thing that had been recently proven to be accurate, because they found something about how there wasn't just one Big Bang, there were multiple Big Bangs, they found the moment or whatever, and now they know that there are multiverse parallel or overlapping or braiding. They don't know for sure how they interact or don't interact, but many, what I call timelines, and they call multiverses, which I think is fantastic. One of my idols is Brian Greene. Are you familiar with him?
A little bit, yes.
Well, he's had some shows on PBS. He's one of the people that makes physics accessible to lay people, and he has some incredibly great books. And his latest book is about the multiverse. And in his book, he has this chart in the back about the most major 11 or 12 theories of the multiverse, which I bet he wishes he had waited a year or two to come out with that, because now he'd have to revise all of it, and he probably is going to do that or write another book or something. But he's really funny and really brilliant. And he'll write physics books so that you're reading along and you understand it. And then he'll say, okay, so if you're a mathematician, keep reading because I'm going to get really into it. If you're not, skip to page 74.
Yeah. Between my love of science fiction and wanting to have real science in there and my day job, which is for a science-based company, I've learned the art of sort of reading the bits you can take and just, not worrying about the parts you can't understand. So I never limit what I read based on, oh, this is hard, I still try to read as much as I can because you learn at least part, and your brain sort of expands and you learn a little bit more the next time.
It's true. It's true. And I've learned so much from reading books by scientists as well as science fiction writers and even fantasy writers, because I think people do a lot of research. That people who are really devoted authors do a lot of research before we write. We don't necessarily write about everything we research, but it kind of imbues our writing. It infuses it, gives it more depth, more range of understanding, because we don't explain it all. It's like you walk into a room, and you don't necessarily explain how everything in that room was made and what the fabric or material of everything is. You might talk about color or function. You might just go sit in a chair. But in order to write about that, you kind of have to know all those things anyway, right?
Right.
So I think that's what we do, don't you think?
I think so, and I think with the science, you really have to understand it in your head so that you can keep it consistent in the story, so that the reader may not ever really understand what you read to get there, but it feels consistent and believable to them.
That is a good point, and that's what people talk about when they appreciate a good science fiction book or a fantasy book, is that it's internally consistent. And that's an important phrase that a lot of people use when they're writing a review or writing their comments or reactions to a story, is they get mad when it isn't.
Right.
Right? We feel betrayed as readers, or we just get confused. Or
Right.
we think the author isn't taking themselves seriously because they aren't tracking what they've written, and they don't recognize, wait a minute, on this page you said this, and now 3 chapters later you say something that doesn't go with that. What's your deal?
And I think paranormal authors also face that same thing. They have to be internally consistent within the world they create. And so even if the science we use in our books is not current day science, because we're projecting into the future, it is still we still have to have that internal consistency for the reader's sake. And it lets us read lots of cool stuff.
It does, but then every now and then, if a book is really working for me, or a TV show or a film, you just have to suspend disbelief at some point, because things just aren't going to make sense. Yes. They aren't logical. They aren't going to work. My favorite example of that, because I'm a huge Joss Whedon fan. Are you?
Oh, absolutely.
So Buffy. Okay, can we talk about Buffy? Can we talk about Buffy?
We can talk a little bit about Buffy, but I have not seen all of Buffy.
Okay, well, you don't need to see all of it to talk about this. Here's my question, Joss. If you ever watch this or somebody gets to you, you talk about in your version of vampires that they don't breathe. Then how does Spike smoke cigarettes? Okay, that's number one. Number two, how does Darlene get pregnant and give birth to a baby? That baby can't get oxygen if they don't breathe. And if she's dead, how can she have a baby and give birth anyway? All right, those are my big angers with Joss Whedon. But otherwise, I adore him, and I love his stuff.
Yeah. Actually, Buffy came out in an era, in a time period where I had a small child, and he had, like, radar ears, And so I could never have it on when it was aired originally. But I've watched everything Joss has done since then, and he's just so brilliant. I love, his command of dialogue. But the whole breathing thing, I think, is they don't have to breathe, but they can if they want to.
Oh, I missed that. Really?
Well, I don't know if that's in Buffy, but that's a lot of fiction uses that idea that they can breathe if they want to. And I think one author I read, it was like they're sort of dead when they're sleeping and alive when they're awake. So their blood's flowing when they're awake, but it just stops when they're dead. I mean,
well, that's certainly how Charlaine Harris treated it, Because in Charlene Harris's series, the Sookie Stackhouse, the True Blood, you know, that series, it got very different on TV, but it kept some of her things. Did you read those, or are you familiar with the TV series?
I have read like 3 or 4 of her books, which were really great and funny. And I watched a little bit of the TV show, but it kind of didn't have the same charm for me.
Yeah, no, definitely wasn't as charming. They weren't going for charm. They were going for, I don't know, dark and nude and lots of other things that she wasn't going for. But I read all her books, and I've seen the whole series, and so I can compare them with great alacrity. But the main thing I would say is, did I say that right? Alacrity? Alacrity. Alacrity. I think that's what I was trying to say. Alacrity. Oh, my brain doesn't work sometimes. That if you are going to make up a story about vampires who have blood that runs, then they have to have a beating heart. But makes sense, because one of the ways you kill vampires in almost everything I've ever seen is you put a wooden stake through their heart. Well, why would you need to do that if it weren't beating?
Yeah, that makes absolute sense to me.
So there's something alive about them. And then her novels and lots of other places talk about the true death, which is when a vampire actually is disintegrated.
Right.
Or dies for real the last time. So then they must have some kind of being alive. They're animated, talking, walking, you know, when they're vampires, and then when they're not, they're in bits and goo and dust or whatever, depending on your version.
The sci-fi version of vampires, don't forget that. And
what'd you say?
There's a sci-fi version of vampires too, you know.
Oh, what's that?
Well, in some sci-fi, I think like Yolanda Stefanos has the sci-fi series, and she has vampires in space, and I think they're just another species, you know. But I've also always loved the idea that a lot of the effects of the vampire come from like nanobots in their blood or something like that, which is really cool.
That's interesting. I have heard the whole other species thing a lot of places. Well, there's a lot of people, and I'm one of them, who is certain that humans and lots of other species on this planet did not originate here. And we can look and look and look, and we will look in vain for the missing link, because there is no evolution that brings us from great apes to human. No matter how many Neanderthals you bring up, we're not the same. We'll never be the same, but we're similar, just the way lots of different kinds of primates are similar.
Yeah, it's really hard to, when you look back in history, it's really hard to say, you know, are all these crazy, strange similarities in cultures, like pyramids on different continents, and there's, you know, imagery of space beings in a lot, like Egyptian imagery and that sort of thing. And is that because there was an outside influence, or was that just that they all shared it because people migrated across the earth, you know, and the continents, you know, shifted? So
well, check it out. They had those pictures in caves way up in northern Japan, way down in Central Africa, way over in Eastern Africa and the Middle East, and way in South America. And the beings look the same.
Yep. Let's just say I'm open-minded. I would love it if there were nice, friendly space aliens out there who helped us along. That would be just so fun.
Well, I'm so glad you bring that up, because that is the premise of the Spanner series. I am very, very, very tired of reading about dystopian, apocalyptic, horrible versions of the alternate future and distant future. There are billions of those, and God love the people that write them and let them write away. But I want to be more entertained and optimistic and have something positive to look forward to. And I couldn't find enough books like that, so I decided to write them.
Mm-hmm.
So in my Spanner series, we do have friendly, helpful aliens who are interested and have been around a long time, doing a lot of things over the centuries. And in my first book, they actually decide that we're allowed to know they're here and to be made public. And so that's how that starts. And I think a lot of people are interested in that version too, because it cannot be possible that all aliens are scary and we have to kill them all. That's just not logical.
Right. That's true. And I think that science fiction has gone through different changes, different times where it's been dark and it's been light, and and I think a lot of people really miss that sort of uplifting, exciting aspect that we got in science fiction, you know, in the 50s, 50s, 40s, in that era, when it was all still really kind of really new and exploding genre. And you know, science fiction, it's great when it can inspire people for good and for exploration, I think. So that's fabulous.
Right, and I don't want to minimize the idea that humans and other creatures around the multiverse might have negative characteristics or psychopathic tendencies or sociopathic plans or just be mean, you know, and I don't leave that out of my books. But I don't want to focus on it, and I don't want to say that that is the only future we have is dystopian. I think that a lot of YA authors are kind of being forced into that, and that's because of the popularity, I guess, of some of those, especially the ones that get made into films. But there are also some really interesting versions of the future that are mixed, just like our current version of reality is mixed. And I think in many ways that is more realistic.
Yeah, there's always good and bad in everything. So, of course, in the future or in Aliens or whatever there is, there's always going to be good and bad. I think the focus on the dystopian in YA may have a lot to do with the fact that it's aiming towards, you know, young adults, adolescents, and that's something they're going through is rebelling against society, rebelling against authority, and so that appeals to them. You know, but it's just a phase in life, I think.
That's possible. Yeah, I think so. Well, we're getting to that part of our show where we have about 15 or 20 minutes left. And in that section, I like to give you a chance to talk about your future projects, other things you're involved in that we haven't mentioned yet. So what would you like the people watching this today or in the future to know about what you're up to?
Well, the Smart Girls Love Sci-Fi blog is still growing, and we're actually looking at adding more things to it all the time. And personally, with my own writing, I have been writing less sci-fi things out there, and have those out under a different pseudonym. But I'm actually embracing the indie route next year. So next year, there should be some books out of my sci-fi romance, hopefully.
Well, let me show people for a minute how they can get in touch with you and where they can see both your websites, in case they didn't see that before. These are also in the comment section on the event page. And then tell us more about what your next project's going to be available in and what it's called.
Right. Well, the series that I've been working on and will plan to release next year is a series called The Arena Dogs, and it is a sort of a space opera science fiction romance, and it is you know, very adventure focused and also very romance focused, and it's a lot about that clash of different cultures. So it is going to be out next year at some time. I'm not sure yet. I haven't created a timeline for that. But I do have a newsletter sign up on my ccalden.com website. So if people are interested in that, it is a very sexy series. But if you're interested in that, you can sign up for the newsletter on my site. A newsletter hasn't actually gone out yet, but it will soon.
Okay. Well, let me ask you a question about the Arena Dogs book, because it looks like you won a prize in the Farside contest for Stealing Mercury. Where does that part fit into the series?
That's the first book, and it's done, it's ready, it's waiting, but I don't really want to put it out there until I have some, you know, a real solid timeline for when the next books are going to be ready. The second book is in progress, and it actually features a heroine with a neural implant. We talked a little bit about what technology is in there, so that's been really fun to write about.
Cool.
Yeah, so and my heroes are all, you know, products of genetic manipulation, so they have different talents and different strengths and weaknesses, and they're kind of fun to write. So the third book is plotted, and you know, I think I should be able to get all three out next year.
And is it a trilogy, or are you going to keep going?
No, it'll be a continuing series. I also have the Parallel Universe book, which I'm hoping to put out next year, and that's the other one you see there under. I retitled it a number of times, but the current title of that is Deadly Lover. So I will have that out next year as well.
Deadly Lovers. Uh-oh, that sounds like it's not going to end well.
It is kind of a dark. It's sort of a serial killer set in the future, yeah, so it is a little dark, but it's a lot of fun too. So.
Okay, well that sounds really interesting. And then in terms of your other work, you are also going to be going somewhere in February. You want to tell us about Daytona Beach?
Yeah, it's a reader convention that I have been attending. Originally, it was called Old City New Blood and was in St. Augustine. That was its first year, and I just attended that. In the second year, they wanted to sort of upgrade their facilities a little bit, so they've moved it to Daytona, and it's now called the Coastal Magic Convention. And
I'm going to pop that up here on the comments so people can see that it's in the comments, and you can get the whole URL there. It's in February. And what are you going to be doing there?
Well, I am one of their featured bloggers. So there's a group of bloggers that we each sort of help introduce the featured authors to our readers and help promote and make people more aware of the conference. During the conference, I'll be moderating panels mostly. And you know, I've played with the idea of trying to do something special for Sci-Fi, because last year they had several Sci-Fi authors there. This year, not so much. So I don't know if I'll do that or not. It'll kind of depend on how many people I can recruit to sort of have some sort of a Sci-Fi get-together while we're there.
Oh, that sounds great, though, because that can really be fun, even if you just get a breakfast or a lunch together with the group.
Right.
That's very supportive, and that's kind of what we do virtually when we get together in these Facebook groups and Google Plus communities, and group together with hashtags on Twitter or in LinkedIn. There's a lot of groups, and I really appreciate those, and I've met so many great people in those. Do you have any that you want to mention that you belong to that you'd like to have people know about?
Online things? Well, mostly I've been involved with online groups that are RWA centered, which is Romance Writers of America. So I belong to several chapters of that, and I interact with those folks a lot. I do still belong to the Brigade, Sci-Fi Romance Brigade, but I haven't really expanded out too much beyond that, but I have a feeling that's going to be happening a lot in the next year. So,
okay. All right.
The blog
what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask you and I both to go to the events page when this is broadcast is concluded, and make sure we put up all the URLs and books or authors we mentioned, so people will be able to track that when they watch this archived version of the video. And I'm going to ask you if there's anything else you want to say in this section before I give you our final question.
I do want to mention that the other pseudonym that I do use is Charlee Allden, and I have I'm in an anthology that just recently came out. It's a time travel anthology called Twist of Time. And I have a story there about that's set in the Viking era. Yeah, I do write some weird different things, and a really, really sweet story about a modern woman going back in time. So that just recently came out, so I'm pretty excited about that.
How do you spell your alter ego's name?
Yes, it's a hard spelling because it's actually like a real name. It's ALLDREDGE.
Aldridge, and then it's Cheryl with a CH?
CH, yeah, that's right.
Okay, so we'll put that in the events comments too. That's great to know.
And the Sci-Fi Romance Quarterly, which we mentioned, that's coming out next week, and I have a column there, of course. And this quarter's issue is about cyborgs. So
great. So here I'm going to pop that up there and let everybody see how to find that. Sci-Fi-RomanceQuarterly.org has the issue that ended in June up there right now, but you're saying the new one's coming out next week for this quarter.
That's right. It'll be out on the 30th, I believe. And it has reviews. It has new fiction. It has we have several columns that are more informational. Mine is usually half about the particular genre, like background sort of things, and then some book recommendations.
Great.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. Well, I'm really excited to hear all the different fingers you've got in different pies, and now I'm going to ask your expert and personal opinion on this question I ask everyone at the end of our Changes Hangout on Air. Given all the personal, local, regional, social, political, global, and economic and climatological and any other kind of changes you're aware of, what would you like to say about how you're responding, thinking, feeling about changes right now?
Right. I think that sometimes with all of the really important things that are changing in our world right now, it can become a really scary place and it can become big and overwhelming. And I guess what I would like to say to people is to remember that you don't have to do it all. You don't have to um, take on everything. The most important thing people here in the U.S. can do is vote in November, because that does make a difference. But I would say I try to act locally. I try to support my local merchants, my local growers. You know, we have a great farmers market, and if you don't think you have one in your area, check the internet. I bet you there is one. And just to sort of, you know, live in accordance with your ideals as much as you can, and that's what I try to do. And if you have opportunities to help out, there's always events in every community, and I try to participate when I can. But, you know, so don't get too overwhelmed and be positive. I'm really excited, particularly with all of the technological advances. You know, we do have the tools to face what's coming. So don't be too overwhelmed by it, I guess.
Well, that's really helpful, Charlie. And I want to just mention that another scientific breakthrough that I heard about this week that relates to what you were just saying is that they have found in the brains of people who are altruistic an enlarged amygdala. That's a very, very small almond-shaped neural cluster in our brain that relates apparently to our intention to be helpful, to go out of our way, to be heroic, to be kind or compassionate, even to strangers, even to people that are far away and never know we did it. And that people who are sociopathic and psychopathic have an atrophied amygdala. And I just think that is so fascinating, and I'm definitely going to be putting things about that in my book. And in the meantime, what I want to know is if anybody's figured out how to activate, enlarge, or strengthen, or enliven the amygdala, that is the next step.
Well, that would be a great next step, but in every advancement, you have to decide how you want to use that knowledge. So we'll see.
Good point. Good point. Well, that's a really important thing to talk about when you're talking about changes and the ones that you were talking about. I'm a big fan of farmers markets, and I used to go all the time. Every other place that I've lived has had them very easily accessible, and I just moved to St. Louis about 5 weeks ago, and they list farmers markets, and it turns out they're fake.
Oh.
They're not real. They had one, but it doesn't happen. This whole year it didn't happen, and I can't seem to find any other ones except really far away. Like there's one about a half an hour from here, which I may go to, but it was really disappointing to find that out because I want to support local farmers and local growers and handcrafts and other kinds of like jellies and whatever else people are doing, but how to find it someplace, it's not so easy.
And there are some things that you can, I don't have any off the top of my head, but there are places you can get some homemade goods through online delivery. You know, so that's always an option too.
That's a good point. Like they have growing clubs and community agricultural buying clubs and things like that that I used to be part of.
But that may not be something you can do. And I think in everybody's life there is something they can do that will work for them to help just be a part of making things better and you know, living a life that makes you happy.
Right, right. And buying locally and supporting local people is certainly important. But since we're both writers and authors, I want to put in a plug for literacy. And I want everybody listening now and in the future to think about how you can help young people and adults learn to read, enjoy reading. There are clubs, there are programs, there are tutoring opportunities, there are bring your dog and read to someone and have the kid read to the dog in the hospital. There's like anything you could want, you could probably find it and plug in. Bring your book, bring somebody else's book, bring a magazine, bring a comic book. They'll have books, you just show up. But there are lots and lots of need for help, especially with young people in learning to read and to enjoy it, and with new adults to this country, new to English, or people who have had a lot of trouble learning to read and need tutoring. So I'm going to put in a plug for everybody who's good at it and likes doing it. Go find somebody else to share it with.
That's great.
I've done that a lot in my life. I've volunteered as a tutor and as a reader and as a person who's helped teach reading. It is partly one of the things I have my degree in, but they train you.
Yeah.
Lots and lots of programs for literacy will train you at the local library or whatever else you have in your community, so look for that. And then what was the other thing you mentioned that I thought was really good about how to help people? You said something else besides buying local. Do you remember what you said?
Just take advantage of whatever opportunity is there. I said vote, but
Vote!
vote.
Vote! That was it. Oops, I just totally derailed my camera. I got so excited. Yes, please vote.
It's really important, and a lot of us forget to do it if there's not a particular election like a presidency at stake, but the midterms are important too.
They're very important, especially now because, as we all know, this government we so don't enjoy has really gridlocked itself. So to ungridlock it, we need to get some better people in there. So whoever you think is better, I'm not telling you who that is, go vote. Vote for them. Vote out the bozos. Get the bozos to go do something else. That's what I'm going to say about that. So I want to thank you, Charlee Allden, for being on here, and Cheryl Aldredge, and anybody else you might decide to be in the future. Thank you for all you do for science fiction writers and romance writers and fantasy writers and all the other ways that you help with your blog and your website and your reviews and everything else you're doing with your writing. Inspiring and encouraging and being creative, and thanks for being on Changes Google Plus HOA.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.
All right, so anybody who wants to know how to watch this in the future probably is already watching it. But if you don't know how to watch it and you want to tell somebody how to watch it, the links are on the page that you're looking at now. And YouTube is going to have it in about 15 minutes for however long YouTube exists on my channel on Changes. And please let people know about it, and I'll be posting it, and you can too, Charlee.
Will do.
All right, so thanks, everybody. And what I say at the end all the time is something about good luck with the changes you're experiencing. Bye for now.